And it's December now, and we have the project of tax code that is proposed by the Ministry of Finance. And also I would like to remind that formally this project is done by discussion that was held during this year, and this is the conclusion of those discussions that were held during the year. Now we saw the document. It's a big one, and 36 hours were during which they studied the information, and now we have here the experts, because it's necessary to comment on the provisions of this document, and the Ministry of Finance actively presented this document in the form of discussion. We didn't invite the representatives of the minister in order to discuss this issue in the expert framework, and regarding different aspects of the tax code, that is administering and the criminal law and the tax evasion and tax reform connected with budget relationship. We have experts from different spheres, and among the present there are experts in different areas, and we will provide everyone with opportunity to speak. And I want to invite Volodymyr Kotenko, who is the partner of Ernst&Young, who worked in RPR project, and he will tell us about the idea that were implemented, and about the text, whether it incorporated those ideas who were discussed in society.
So there are two different things. Actually, the project meets the requirements of the presentation. I would like to start from the very beginning. In fact, 2015, as many expected, must become the year of the tax reform, which it hasn't become, and it couldn't become this one because they started to talk about that in the end of 2014 only. And let us be honest, the preparation of such a large-scale document, which could be perceived as something new, doesn't require not only 1 month or 2 months. In the discussion that we need to come up with some tax code, we started in December 2014. In that time, in order to really to hope for a new tax code at the end of the next year, this year, I mean, we had to have different conditions. The situation repeats. Maybe I'm running ahead of our discussion, but however, one could believe this year didn't become the year of the tax reform. Unfortunately, it's too late. We lost the time. We have to take the chance which we still have. There are some documents with which we can work. The draft law 3617, the draft law prepared by the Cabinet of Ministers. We have to prepare until June next year and try to apply this. In order to introduce new taxes, we should not prepare the documents consisting of 300 or more pages. Another point, to which extent the expectation what can be given by these or can be offered by those draft law, would they coincide with the expectations and the provision of the documents? I believe that the difference between the desired results and the expectations and what can be offered by the MPs or the government will be always there. And this difference will be of such scope that which cannot be overcome. We do not want some kind of the rates or some new words in the document. We wish some results to achieve. And the change of transformation doesn't happen overnight or over a short period of time. It requires longer time. Unfortunately, not all the problems which are perceived by the society. They not exist only in the tech sphere. And not only because of the reason of the not correct text or some wrong rates, but the reasons are much more diverse and difficult. The draft law actually from the Minister of Finance, it really meets the requirements of Minister of Finance, which is natural, and that was kind of an attempt to improve or to correct the mistakes which the authors of this draft law knew, and they tried to do that. Whether they succeeded in that or not, well, we can immediately say partially they did not succeed. But those who know the details of this draft law, those are the mistakes which can be easily corrected, or not maybe so easy, but can be corrected. But the question is, this draft law did not. There was not an attempt to change, to introduce some dramatic changes. They were talking about to ensure the stability and balance of the incomes and the expenses, and we can understand those views. But can we say that this draft law or such a model of the tax system will be conducive or will suppress, on the contrary, the economic activity? Everybody will have its own ideas or observations, and I'm more than positive that sometimes they will be diametrically opposite. But I repeat myself, the objective of this draft law, I would not call it a reform. I consider this to be this kind of continuation of the attempts, based on inertia, so far to stabilize the situation or to do something which would be perceived as stabilization of the situation. And this is just preparation for the reform which can be implemented maybe next year. So to sum up, this proposal can be the basis for the subsequent or the further work on the reform, as I mentioned. We have a unique situation. We have 3357 and the Minister of Finance draft law, which can be, at least we can try to unite that, at least for the taxpayers, for the businesses to prepare a document till the end of June next year, which is required by the law and the common sense. The laws must reflect the common sense, and in this sense, to adopt some legislative acts at least 6 months before the implementation, and this is the coincidence between the common sense and the law. And so, actually, if we continue this and we can complete that in the first half year, this is not the compulsory condition, but in other words, just to shake the business just in the year of the new year, they, for example, propose to change the reporting term from the quarter to another one. And this is not acceptable. Thank you for your assessment. Mykhailo Sokolov is one of the constructive critics of the Minister of Finance in different issues and many issues, especially if you're talking about the taxation in agriculture. Your impressions regarding the proposals of the Minister of Finance, what is reasonable there, which is subject to criticisms. First of all, I would like to talk about the VAT section, which I know better than anything else. What disappoints me, I'm disappointed that I did not see there some of the things which, in my point of view, are indisputable, which have to be implemented. And we've been involved in negotiations with the Minister of Finance for many years now. If you take 3357 draft law, they have the system of open register for the application for VAT, and the principle of the let's say the step by step, or the first in first out. So for some time we can postpone the implementation or the let's say appeal against that, but as soon as it is back to the taxpayer, it has to be taken care of. This kind of regular sequence. This must answer the problems which had to remove the concerns which have been for a long time here. Why they do not include that? The Minister of Finance for a long time now have had to introduce that, but they do not do that for some reasons. Maybe there are some reasons why the government doesn't want to make this procedure transparent one. This actually, I'm against that. Number two, when they introduced VAT, they promised to everybody, since these tax obligations are supported by the money, and the government they are guaranteed to receive that money, so the tax loans must be approached from that point of time. Seemingly, they try to do that. There is a special article if there is some mistakes in the invoice, but you can understand what is all that about. It can be it is workable, but to which extent do those invoices, let's say invoices, the waybills can may be understood, and then the tax loan can be lifted if they violated the procedural registrations of the regulatory act, which is prepared by the Minister of Finance itself. That means that the Minister of Finance can take care of any kind of the conditions, approve them, and the borrower actually doesn't register the waybill. So somebody was mistaken. They actually violated the instruction of the Minfin. They will remove my credit or loan, but the money will be received by the government. I cannot explain this, but only by the desire by somebody to do something wrong. I'm not talking about the rates. This is not the issue of the revenues, or let's say the charges. This is the registration of different hooks. Everybody knows about that, and this is why the businesses suffer. In principle, there are a lot of let's say imperfections, but you have to read that attentively. At last, they took into consideration the thing, we cannot talk about the registration of the taxpayer if they cannot be found at the proper address. Either he puts the money and it doesn't has nothing to do with the address. Okay, they agreed to that. We are blessed. But there are some things which could not be ignored at all. And they took that in consideration. Others which could not be ignored either, they ignored that, and we are left with the same problems we faced before. Now a few words regarding the reform of agriculture. They completely canceled the special regime of VAT. This is the requirement of IMF. Nobody says anything, but either in this case we have to provide the direct support for the most for those sectors which suffer mostly, and or when they preserve this kind of special regime for the animal breeding experts. In fact, there are different other options, and we are talking about the year when we have the drop of the cattle, number of the cattle by 10%. We have a very difficult situation after the closing of the wars with Russia. Well, this problem is not being tackled. Nothing is mentioned in the code. Seemingly, this problem doesn't exist. Now, the question regarding the system of taxation of the natural persons. For the we have this single tax, and even the Ministry of Finance agreed that de facto we have this kind of tax. So we have an interesting system under which most efficient, the highest rates, if you add up all those caps and whatever else, the poor pay less, then there is a growth, and the middle class pays the maximum rate, then there is cap for the single unified tax. I can understand that logic. Maybe better would be to drop the general burden, but to leave the efficient tax for the rich as for the middlemen. The country where we have the problem with the middle class, it's logical to adopt such measures. This briefly were major things. Speaking principle, the basic our concern is not related to the rates. We can actually discuss that. Most of my concerns are associated. I expect that they will actually do something in order to prevent the corruption. I couldn't see that, at least in the section I'm talking about. Thank you, Mikhail. I would like to give the floor to Serhiy Verlanov. There is a circle of the people who take care of administering. So if it's possible, those proposals related to the criminal legal issues, the relations with judges, thank you, Taras. I had a chance to analyze the code, the proposal regarding those issues, regarding the attitude of the taxpayers in relation between the taxpayers administrator and GFS. The first thing which I would like to say, there was no demilitarization. We just dealt with some kind of changing our names, which casts a shadow, no, not the shadow, but puts the question mark to which extent the IMF requirements or demands are the dogma for those who take care of development of the code, because the issue of demilitarization also was raised by the IMF. They renamed the tax police into the Fiscal Investigation Service and nothing else. Now, speaking about administration regarding the appeals against that, speaking about the cancellation of the advance payments on the one hand, then they introduced the period as a quarter, return to the period of the quarterly reporting, and the increase in the burden regarding compliance, increase in number of the payments. This is the disputable issue. The mathematics requires some specific analysis. Speaking about compliances, from point of view administration, they offer the complaining about appealing against the results of the inspections and a new system of complaints, and all the complaints are going to be considered by the state fiscal service, and the term is 20 working days, not more than 40 working days. Very interesting information. Some kind of the appeals council composed of 3 representatives of this service and Minister of Finance and Business Ombudsman, who will have to consider all the issues related to the more than 1,000 untaxed minimum when we actually cross the line for the criminal prosecution. As we know from statistics, on the one hand, this is a certain simplification, because we can talk about the efficiency of the 2-tier system, because this is not efficient today. On the other hand, the proposed options, there is some idea, and I would agree here that the code, I would agree with Vladimir that the code is the set of ideas which are not detailed and they are not projected regarding their vitality. Because if you're talking about last year, there were more than 6,000 criminal proceedings. So 3 persons within 15 working days, they have to consider more than 6,000 criminal cases. This is not realistic. In the worst cases, the burden was 800 on 1,200 cases, and they were not limited with 15 working days term. This is the stillborn child in its essence. And then if you're talking about the introduction of alternative dispute resolution or settlement, there is some logic behind that, and the subject who can take part in all this. Again, we're talking about very high threshold, 200 million for the system for the major or the large taxpayers or the bad taxpayers. The ideology behind that is first we have the pilot, and then the system is going to be introduced for everybody. Because again, if we're talking about the quality of the taxpayers before the law, is again a big question mark. The result of this mediation is the transaction. Based on the results of this transaction, they do not launch the criminal proceedings. Now we are talking about the criminal proceedings. They introduced some changes, kind of targeted in a special part of the criminal code into the profile articles 191 to 12, 3, something. So their meaning is in case the compromise is reached, the criminal proceedings are subject to closure, to be closed. From point of view of the idea, maybe it's okay, but again, this is true about those taxpayers who has more than the 10 million hryvnia and who agreed to that. From point of view of the legal techniques, I can understand how they're going to close the case, kind of rehabilitation basis or not. Are going to just to release from the criminal responsibility or liability which exists today, but this is not rehabilitation circumstances. That means that the taxpayer just agreed that he was guilty and paid the necessary penalty or whatever. That was done by analogy within tax compromise. They just closed the criminal cases. Again, this could be efficient, but for non-rehabilitation circumstances, this hasn't been resolved. I would say that this machinery actually defended their own positions, and they took a few steps to meet the major players, the large taxpayers, and they introduced certain modern institutions. But on the whole, as a minimum, we have to further specify those procedures and make them more fair from the point of view of the quality of all the taxpayers before the law on the one hand. On the second hand, we have the state has to resolve the problem related to all the tax articles. What we are trying to protect, what kind of the social relations we're trying to protect. Do we protect the whole the system of taxation and compliance? In other words, only the fact as of today that if you did not pay the tax, this is regarded as criminal the crime, whether you pay it later or not, or we take a step, maybe not forward, but we further develop the story and say that the country or the government actually protects the payments to the budget. If the taxpayer did not pay the taxes, that means that he is not subject to liable to criminal liability. There is no answer to that question in this code. Excellent.
And I think that all the experts, we have one vacant place, and maybe we won't sell this place, and we will give the floor to everyone who wants to speak now. Pavlo Kukhta, you are given the floor. We are going to speak about the budget and the position of the Ministry of Finance and whether this position is correct. Thank you, Taras. Mr. Kotenko said that it's easy to change the rates, and this is the component of the system of rates, and it should be considered separately. And if we are not able to negotiate about the administering, there can be a component of rates that we can adopt these rates. So at the moment, the Ministry of Finance announced, and showed a new for Ukraine, a new budget for the next year. Why it's new? They announced the reduction of expenses and expenses that include and they also announced the package of structural reforms, verification of those who benefit from social benefits. These were these will be included in the budget, and in the framework of the reform, they also going to, according to this, the current legislation, we know there will be a coefficient of 0.67, and it will lead to the decrease of the weight on wages, and it's a problem. The problem of high taxes in Ukraine. The wages are heavily taxed, and this is bad for our state. That's why we can't. And this budget is. If we want to have a quality budget for the next year, we should make the system of rates that will be balanced. And in any case, even if there should be some changes to the legislation during December that will provide the balance for the budget. It's not easy. As Kotenko said, in decentralization reform, it's very important to create opportunities for local governments and local budgets. It should be done in a way that each village or united community be balanced, and it's difficult to do. And it is necessary that these rates, the system of rates, it should be adopted, and it should provide the adoption of the budget. And we have to speak not about draft laws, we should speak about ideas. We have components of reforms, blocks of reforms, and we can compose them in different, make different structures of them. So we can continue our discussion for the reforms of 2016. Your opinion, please. And I'm going to speak about the simplification of the system of taxation. I'm the specialist in this. And the project, this is the most serious change. They propose in simplified system. They are going to change the way of calculation of these taxes and to introduce requirements, additional requirements of calculations, and I think that the essence of this is known. They canceled the second group of a single tax that pay fixed tax, and instead of this, they should pay a tax, the percentage of the profit, and the influence will be not homogeneous, because the system works in a way that if person pays 8,000 a year, it's a second group, the biggest group of physical persons, more than 500,000 of people, and these 8,000, it's about 20% of the profit. And if there's 1.5 million, so the level of this is very different. And first, they want to level the rates. The rates will be the same for the small and medium size, and also they will provide some benefits, because if there's less than 50,000 to 60,000, these entrepreneurs won't pay any taxes, or part of them will pay less than now. And according to the calculations made in the institute where I work, Institute of Political Studies, the first year of reforms, if we use the rates and taxation that is in the project of Ministry of Finance, and we can compare it with the existing tax code, that this will be a reduction of the level of taxes in about for half the enterprises, and for half the level would increase. But for some entrepreneurs, it will be the increase. If you pay 8,000 of single tax, and if the person will pay the tax about 1,000 or 2,000, so the for some entrepreneurs the taxation will rise in 20-30 times. This is the step in the right direction, because in this way we'll overcome the regressive character of the system, and tax optimization that works, and it is used by big companies that employ people. They in the end, the system will create equal opportunities for different enterprises, in order that the competition among enterprises will be due to better products, and in this way the competition will be healthy, and it will accelerate the development of small enterprises that are more effective, and in the result there will be positive influence on the economy of the country, because it's very important for the dynamics of business development, where innovations are present. And we have weak places in this reform, the use of cash tax. It's difficult for many enterprises, especially for the smallest, and there were some proposals concerned that the government should present these cash machines for these entrepreneurs, and the government didn't approve this idea.
Cash register.
And there's an issue that in what way they will verify these expenses, what documents should be provided, and what will be the actions of tax bodies, and what illegal practices are employed now. And as a conclusion, I want to say that the issue of simplified taxation is a politicized issue, and there are some groups of interests that want to preserve the system, and if this project of the Ministry of Finance will be adopted, this reform will be implemented that is directed to solving these problems of simplified taxation. And maybe it will be for further discussions.
Thank you. The questions and comments. Okay. I understand you have a question, you have a comment. Okay, please. Just use the mic. And please introduce yourself. Who was the first, Taras? Okay, very briefly, please, so that everybody has a chance. I had a question regarding the excise policy of the Minister of Finance to everybody who would like to answer this question. It is planned to increase by 40% the excise duty or charges for the cigarettes for next year. Whether it's too much or too low, in your point of view, also there is information in the media that the manufacturers of cigarettes are involved in what they call the trade wars. They try to capture the bigger part or portion or share of the market. So what are the planned payments from this excise, and what kind of influence the government is going to take if those payments will decrease? Thank you. It's a very specific issue. Okay, please either come here for you to see you. For the Alexander company CC Ukraine European Consult. Since I'm involved in excise issues all my life, yes, you're right. Dweller plus 40%, but it doesn't pertain only to cigarettes. If you depart from this grounded analysis and to consider from the point of liberalization what is proposed by the Minister of Finance, you said the single social contribution, all the rest is the increase. This is not liberalization. We do not have the shadow and whatever. The indices which we could simulate the Ministry of Finance and the Fiscal Service to work in the direction of the itinerization. Are there any increase? Speaking about excise, this excise levy excise duties, the increase for cigarettes, for alcoholic drinks, alcohol, and wines by 3 times for alcohol and 5 times for dry wines. This kills the market, for sure, because they start the processes. Everything will go into the gray sector, into the shadow. So the closing provisions, item 6, microphone, please. Temporarily till the 6th of December 2015, decision on the decision of the court, all those confiscated or seized tobacco products and transport vehicles will go to the ATO zone. This is something which everybody was against. The volunteers and what this item is included in the closing provisions. And the draft law which they prepared was cancelled. What you were talking about confiscated goods. First of all, this is the evidence. When it stops to be evidence, it has to be actually eliminated or liquidated. It was done even in the United States. This is actually support of the legal market, increase of the excise duties, and this. The excise duties were a specific topic, you know. Anybody else would like to talk about the excise taxes? 1.5 minutes about this topic, because we have to close this issue. Please stick to the time limits. Otherwise, Vitaly Sheremeta, the Development Company. Speaking about the excise taxes, I do not completely agree with this kind of criticism, because excise taxes over the time when we had the retail excise, which is now being turned into the national excise, we actually, there was partial going of the business into shadows, you know, and including this reform actually, the national tax duty, we are talking about the partial increase. This number one. Number two, what has been said already. We have to, the simplest actually message how to preserve the balance. And I can understand here Minister of Finance, which could support some of the easier terms in some of the regions if there are. This is kind of the extra, let's say, the insurance, because they are going to put the burden to the smokers, and they are going to suffer most of all. And I cannot see too much negative in that. I would like to emphasize that in the issues of excise taxes, the Minister of Finance mentioned that a priori, that Ukr Vodka Association, speaking about excise taxes for alcoholic beverages, they gathered one time and did everything opposite. This is a kind of the discussion between the blind and the deaf persons, you know. Increasing the excise taxes for 100% for the strong alcoholic beverages and let's say items for the weaker. You know, you should. There is very simple schedules in the. Only in 2014 they increased by 2% excise plus 3% minus 25% of the drop in the production. Nobody did anything this year. They did not increase the excise. The drop is minus 20 for export, minus 60%. Last year they collected 4 billion. Yeah, not much by the increase of the excise, but let us again increase the excise, but we won't have the results. They will just close some of the enterprises with the loss of jobs, etc. Nothing special, no. But we were expecting some fundamental things on shadowing procedures, where the alcohol goes from or comes from. I didn't see any resolution of Zucker Spirit with excise stamp. They failed to do anything. They invented the electronic administration system for 2 days, you know. They want to introduce excise taxes for the gasoline, tobacco products, and the coffee products unified. This is crazy, you know. We have 71 hryvnia today. I won't make it 140, but we have the right for five years to come to those rates, but they do not give us that opportunity. Let's talk about ideology. We would like to give this country the chance to increase the number of jobs, and to say a priori that the production in this country is going to be shut down. And please, guys, look for the jobs in foreign countries. So we are absolutely against this kind of absolutely crazy thing. So this is an autonomous topic in this discussion. Maybe we could switch over to some other topics. Introduce yourself and please stick to the time limits. Alexander Shemyatkin with his consulting company. I am the co-author of the 357 Yuzhanina. So can just a sec for the excise taxes. In fact, we had 10% of the import duties. We increased VAT for there's kind of hygienic products. Now we have 20% of the market in the shadow sector. Well, according to the results of the research, almost 23 billion hryvnia is the shadow import. Well, excise is kind of the practice, kind of two different countries existing in parallel to each other. What is in the shadow, what is not in the shadow. Speaking about was this reform or not, I agree this is not reform. Whenever you're reading some kind of the Minister of Finance proposed codex, you're trying to find the reform, there is no reform. So to speak about the ideas when the taxpayers were going to pay their taxes, or what cases they're going to open the criminal cases, we can't talk about that. We have to read some details. Actually, they tried to improve what existed before, not more than that. And should we expect that this is going to be adopted? I believe this is rather a political move on the part of the Minister of Finance. This is a provocative code. They do not want this to be adopted or accepted. Why they are doing that? Maybe there's some political confrontations, but but should we expect that the taxpayers are going to be responsible for all that? Where's the issue of responsibility? They still did not fail to put into order the provisions about the tax agency. We have a lot of different cases in the courts. The advance payments, the VAT has not been compensated for. When they introduced the electronic administration of VAT, when the Commerce said that they agreed, but nothing was done. They continue to lie to us. This is a kind of big time game. How we could cancel this threshold level, the idea of the unshadowing or issuing credit to the economy. If you take this Zhanina draft, you may criticize that, but again, if you're talking about the distributed profit, it's considered to be the best model of stimulating economy, because we have some kind of time between the payment and the redistribution, and all this time the country or the government. I know that you love these taxes. They accumulated 40 billion. Actually, this is the inflation. The tax is 50%. Next year, we expect not less than 25%. Because if we have the inflation 50%, the inflation rate next year not less than 25%. Actually, all of us, we pay the inflation tax when there is a drop in the hryvnia rate, and all the tax bodies report about the increase of the payments. Actually, people have to pay the inflation rate and everything at the same time to the government, and everything is increased in the price for everything increase. In just a very simple example, when they have the holiday for 60 days, when the money come, because of this inflation rate, the money is not that valuable any longer. When they increase the rate, we're talking about this unified social payment. We had 13% previously, when we promised all the time that it would be better, it will decrease. But on the contrary, they increased this burden. and you know whether the 60% or 70% will be in the gray zone, in the shadow. All those bodies with police or tax police have the rights to start the criminal cases, launch criminal cases based on the results of inspection. You know, in this kind of compensation with the VAT is not transparent. We do not simulate the economy. We create the parallel world in the form of the shadow economy. Alternative point of view, are there any other comments or questions? Okay. Economic news. We forgot to talk about the relation of the state budget for 2006 and this tax code. How they're interrelated, and if this tax reform is going to be adopted, not adopted, the Minister of Finance wishes to not to any reform to be adopted and to fix for next year's the games rules of games in the tax sphere. No, judging by the budget which they propose, they obviously are going to decrease the taxes. Even without adoption of new tax adoption, we will have the deficit in the taxes in the pension fund, which will be the burden for the government budget. Since the share in this expected tax is not going to increase, so if actually we are talking about decrease by a certain percentage of VAT. If we do not adopt some system of the rates which will be the parameters of budget, we are going to actually torpedo all the reforms in this budget. If I may, I'm going to comment what already. Speaking about the excise and the reform of that excise, I do not agree with that because the problem was the indexation in Ukraine is in the high taxation. We do not have the problem with the high excise duties for the alcohol and tobacco because this actually those are socially detrimental kinds of products which we would like to tax as much as possible. We try to get money as much as possible from that. You know, it's ridiculous to talk about some kind of trying to limit the consumption of alcohol and the tobacco. So we have to increase the rates, which are lower than European level, and it's logical that they try to increase the excise and decrease the salary taxes. Also, if you're talking about $1 trillion of the in the shadow sector, honestly speaking, you says that the shadow economy is 70% of the GDP and the shadow sector 1 trillion. That means that you have minus 30%. You have kind of a negative shadow economy. So mathematics is wrong here. If we're talking about the distributed profits, I think we can return to this topic in 2017 because we cannot do it simultaneously to decrease the single tax or social tax or.
Труд высокий, налоги на капитал низкие, распределенная прибыль еще дальше их снижает. Стоит ее вводить, не стоит, это отдельный вопрос, это действительно интересная тема, хотя она совершенно не распространена в мире, и это абсолютно не какой-то типичный ход. Это есть всего там в 2 странах, да, в Эстонии и в Гонконге, все. Но, в принципе, обсуждать это можно, но здесь есть много нюансов. Я не думаю, что мы готовы сейчас прямо на 16.
We can discuss this topic, but it's too early. We cannot adopt it this 2016. Seriously, actually consider that. So please speak slower. Actually, not for the sake of the translation, not for somebody to understand. I would like to not to disagree with you. This is part already of the existing legislation. So the Minister of Finance had to come with their proposals in compliance with the existing law. So if this code of the Minister of Finance is not going to be adopted, they will have to decrease the rates to bring it in compliance with the existing law. I cannot see here the direct connection, the tie. This number one. Number two, I do not think we can unambiguously say that we have the low rates, excise taxes, whatever, and to talk that it's in the depth to decrease the consumption of some harmful products. We are going to simulate the revenues to the budget. We have the big doubts that we'll have more payments to the budget. When we try to push everything to the shadow sector, we actually decrease the payments. When my colleagues said that the dozens of percent increase will decrease the consumption by percent, this is a good evidence that we approach this threshold. A lot is in the shadow sector because consumption of alcoholic beverages or tobacco products or the drugs is not elastic consumption. That's why we have to do calculations. Not to manipulate here because those are the realities. The elasticity is rather high over the last few years, especially we are talking about alcoholic drinks. Perhaps, but again, we have to do calculations and see. And the last thing regarding the reform. Okay, let's agree to the rates of the Minister of Finance proposed by Minister of Finance, and then later we can talk about administration. This kind of blackmail, Minister of Finance or the Fiscal Service doesn't want the changes in the administration because this will make it possible to try to substitute plan for some changes. You have the chances to manipulate with the administration, can introduce any figure, which is very convenient. So there must be some kind of the compromise. So you would like to increase the rates, so stop doing something wrong and bring it to correspondence with your forecast, or if you cannot do that, then decrease the expenses. You have the comment or the question? Okay. Speaking of the excise and taxes, I am prepared to organize a separate briefing. I'm sorry, and when I was talking about those figures, those were not the figures of 2014 year. I was talking about the excise taxes for tobacco products and alcohol. When we are talking about under the some excise markets, it's better to use some figures. Let's organize this discussion. I'm prepared to that. Because it's very difficult to understand us hearing the words. I would like to start with the thanks to the organizers for this discussion. Anastasia Baklan represents here the National Platform on Small and Medium Business. Last week they declared about the launch of coalition to support the simplified taxation system. Now we are talking about the plan of the Ukraine advocacy campaign. For the powers to take consideration the existing economic situation in the country and introduce a moratorium for the changes. Before changes are introduced or after? Desirable before that. Also, we would like to invite the business associations to unite. We have details on the website of the National Platform for Medium and Small Business. Also, questions to you. You mentioned that big number of the entrepreneurs. This reform will increase their some of the tax to be paid. Do you have any calculations? How many businessmen and how many entrepreneurs will suffer as a result of the adoption of this kind of proposal of Minister of Finance? Such calculations exist. I believe we can talk about some order of the figures. It's impossible to give an accurate figure of the entrepreneurs of this kind. This problem should be discussed comprehensively. To somebody, this will mean the decrease of the tax burden. To others, increase. We are talking about micro business. There is a definition of micro business. which is contained in the economic code of Ukraine, and which fixes that the micro business with a turnover up to 2 million euros. Can you imagine this micro business? The majority, 99%, all the enterprises which work under the simplified system, they fall into this definition of micro business, but there is a big differentiation of taxation. For example, if the enterprise pays 8,000 hryvnia from the 1.5 million euro turnover, you can make your calculation. So for such enterprises, the taxation burden will increase tenfold or 20-fold in the sum of the taxes which can be additionally taken from them. This is the sum which will lead to the increase of the payments of the single tax. Everybody understands about those taxes. Let's be honest, and Minister of Finance is right. While you have the internal offshore, when you have the legal scheme of the going to shadow, we cannot say that we are talking about the reforms. If we decrease the tax rates, we have to increase the base and to create the minimization of the shadowing, because everybody who works openly, they will have this burden, and those who hide themselves, they will not pay anything. Do you know how many entrepreneurs will go to the shadow sector if you introduce this kind of taxation? In fact, the serious answer is very complicated to that question. I do not know anything about those calculations. If we're talking about the studies within the framework of unshadowing effort, we could not actually get the answer to that question because this requires the data which we do not have. The entrepreneurs do not provide much reports. We have to very specifically, thoroughly study their activities. The concept of the shadow is not an easy one in itself. If you take in the international approaches, what is the shadow economy? There are different stages of the different enterprises being in the shadow. There are white enterprises, and those enterprises completely actively in the shadow sector. Between those two extremities, there are some intermediate stages. For example, only part of the workers are in the employees in the shadow, or the part of the products, etc. And the conditions in which the shadow business for itself is the part of the shadow money. So the question is how we're going to change it. If you introduce the cash registers, maybe the shadow share will decrease, it will not disappear. I would like to comment regarding the income tax. There is desire of the Minister of Finance to collect that. I will disappoint you. If 4 billion and the burden with the increases, they will form this kind of at least 30 billion. We are talking about the extra payment which will not returned. And you want the Minister of Finance to collect some other taxes? This will be absolutely a criminal action, on their part. I'm not trying to put the blame at anybody's door, but you're not talking about the not distributed profit. You have to collect the profit, but next year won't collect anything from the profit. Return what you already collected, but the government does not return it. In our classical model of profit taxes, when the difference between the exchange rate is increases, everybody is in the minus area, We already created offshore the classical system of that and the system which exists today in the country. I'm talking about the Minister of Finance, and you're supporting my Minister of Finance actively now. The idea of the Minister of Finance in this taxation code is just to balance off everything. There is no idea to further develop something, to unshadow something, Just to, this is the code for the accountants, And we have, the major message of Yerezka, Minister of Finance, the balance of but this is not the idea. Without this, IMF will not give us the money, but the major message must go deeper inside in the decrease of the. Okay. As a moderator, I would like to say what I think. I would like to say that you have to determine, are you against the anti-inflation things or for the balance of the public finances? Because if, roughly speaking, you're against that the cornerstone is the balance of the public finances, why you then criticize the inflation of the profit tax? And the Minister of Defense does not conceive that the major cornerstone is to put in the order the balance, of public finances. They actually emphasize this. Roughly speaking, this political choice which we have, but this can also resolve the things which you criticize. What I mean to say that this cannot be the idea of the code just to balance of everything, just to collect the money. We have the major reasons for the shadow sector. Very high, unrealistic tax rates, salaries, not tax capital. We have the problems with administration. What do you mean the cash registers? We give it to the small business, it will be there, but there will be some persons coming and take everything without looking even at those cash registers. To try to introduce what works in Europe, where they have the tool of which allows to exercise control, without bringing everything to order in the customs service. The country had those possibilities, but they did not do anything about that. There is another issue, maybe some new questions, additional, so they would cover everything, then sum up everything.
An Agrarian Council, aspirant student, the changes in taxation of gas extraction, how can it influence the sphere? It depends on the changes that will be adopted and those proposals that are introduced in the draft law and so the 357. The proposal was to reduce the taxes that are taken from the volume of extraction and oil and gas. This proposal in the Ministry of Finance is observed. We should verify this. And now this proposal is not of business community. It was given to IMF, the sponsor, the donor. But the idea of the industry was of consensus character to reduce taxes and that it should be connected to the scope of extraction, and there should be possibility to prospect other sources at the proper level, and maybe this is the end of the discussion, but the comments that we got from different commenters, it shows that there's no agreement so in this variant. So maybe MPs shouldn't adopt any of these options and introduce it into 2016, the large-scale reform. The good approach will be to continue to reduce taxes on salaries and to improve the law on the 0.6 coefficient is a step ahead, And as to administration, I think everyone agrees that we should limit the opportunities of public servants to limit the public servants and their approach to this area, and no one is ready now to adopt new rules that people will live, and this are the issues of and here two main tendencies clash. We can't make an order among themselves, because if we need it, we try to benefit from the situation. So to limit the rules in the countries, the public servants that cannot fulfill their obligations that are appropriate to the services in normal conditions. And the other direction, they try to toughen the conditions by introducing cash registers and other measures. And these things are contradictory, but at the same time we can't adopt all of them, and it's you can't adopt contradictory things at the same time. And in the draft law, that will be the combination of different concepts. There can be different measures of tough administration and many measures as to the changes in quality of control bodies. It's not a problem to reduce obligations, but people should use the opportunity, and this problem exists not only in taxation. These problems exist in public service, and the most liberal, and we will put ourselves in the situation. The optimization process starts, and then the state will be reduced to some, maybe Grushevskaya Street, if they will be able to get these premises. But we spoke about income tax, and as a person who 1 year ago was one of the co-authors of the project that is not in that form that we wanted to make it, I want to tell about the main idea of the draft law and I can't see any problems in the income tax. I just want to say that we should balance the system in order that the accountants can relax from all those changes. We shouldn't introduce many new changes. Ask accountants, bookkeepers. And I worked 10 years in accountants, and as an accountant, and then as an auditor, and all those. I am as accountant. I can make an imaginary income, but for example, it will be. I participated in the discussions. It's not critical for the budget. It's critical as the understanding of the system of accountancy. This is the main system. Let's work for several years, and then we will see. I think you exchange your opinions. So These are the first impressions, and maybe during the months we will meet in different formats. Do you have some conclusions? I would like to add that we should understand that partly what we wanted to decide, there was a mistake from the start when they introduced tax reforms without reforming of without reforming expenses. And it was done then ad hoc, and the state is corrupt and ineffective. And it is supported by this system that pressure the resources out of business. And to conduct a reform, we should reform the state, we should reduce it. The main idea is the reduction of expenses. And if we adopt this budget and the situation that will be at the end of the year, we will reduce according to the Ministry of Finance scheme. And if we will be able to make structural reforms to reduce taxes, if we don't do this, we won't have any financial and taxation space, and there will be discretions, and it's an illusion that we can improve the system easily. I think that we should concentrate on the structural reforms of expenses. And during 2016, maybe we can improve it further, and we can reform state service also during the year. And I would like to say briefly about political aspect. They say that we should conduct discussions and to reach consensus of in the taxation reform. I think this is a strange idea, because there are different groups, different interests. Someone wants to pay bigger taxes or to reduce taxes, and the process of regulation of taxation of taxes is the political process, and one of the key directions that is a part of political life. And this process is accumulated in the government that is appointed by the coalition, that has the majority in the parliament, and the government should be responsible. And if this project that the government will provide, if this is a result of a consensus, it will be adopted. And today's situation is strange, because among the majority there are different opinions on what this reform should be, and it's not understandable who should be responsible. If there's draft law 3357, who will be responsible for the implementation of the draft law? If it won't be this government, so there should be this. We should also take into account political aspect, and take into account there won't be an ideal reform. It's impossible to have it in real life. And as a moderator, my conclusion, I think to stress the idea that the draft law of the Ministry of Finance and 3357 draft law focuses on the ideas that are discussed now as to the administration of taxes, and the issue of rates is the sphere of public finances, and the discussion is there more liberal. But as to the administration, all the ideas, they are highlighted, and in those materials that is spread by the ministry, there is an illustration of the effort to combine these ideas, some of these ideas. And roughly speaking, we are in the situation where we should discuss in the framework of these projects and to find solutions that can be implemented. That is also a good step in the realization of the reform. This is my optimistic conclusion of this discussion. And in December, I think December will be maybe we will work hard in December. I thank you all, and we will invite you for further discussions. Thank you.